have some good things in our life. Perhaps it's a loving relationship, an interesting job, or a comfortable home. But those things seem to have relatively limited impact on our daily happiness. And on the same end, there are some horrible things around us, perhaps sexism, racism, cracks in our personal relationships, inefficiencies at the workplace. But over time, we just get used to those things. We stop noticing them, and if we stop noticing them, we don't try to change. So today I'm going to share with you what we've learned about why this happens and what can we do to regain sensitivity, both to the good things in life, so we can feel the joy again, but also to the bad things, so we could notice and change. So habituation is our tendency to respond less and less and less to things that are constant or that are frequent or change very, very gradually. So we have a diminishing physiological and emotional response to frequently repeated or constant stimuli. We just stop responding to those. So the question is this habituation a good thing or is it a bad thing? And the answer is yes. So on the positive side, habituation ensures that we are motivated, right? If you think back to your first entry-level job, you probably were quite excited and happy about this entry-level job. But what would happen if you continue being as excited and as happy about this entry-level job 10 years in? You wouldn't be motivated to go after the next job, right? To go after that promotion. So habituation ensures that we progress, that we want to move forward. It is also important for our survival. We stop responding to things that are constant around us so we can have more resources to respond to new things that are coming our way that may need some response, some action. And finally, we know that problems in habituation are related to a whole range of mental health problems. However, on the other hand, habituation also means that we don't feel the joy of the good things around us because they've always been there, and we don't feel the gratitude. And on the other hand, we stop noticing the suboptimal things around us, which we could perhaps change. So the challenge really is, how do we regain sensitivity? Both to the good things and to the bad things. How can we dishabituate? And really the key here is this wonderful quote by the economist Tibor Skitowski. He says, pleasure results from incomplete and intermittent satisfaction of desires. So we might want to think about breaking up the good things into bits. However, if we need to complete an unpleasant task like household chores or admin work, we actually want to do them in one go, not have breaks. Because if we have them in one go, then the habituation to the negative will actually help us motor through. So we want to swallow the bad whole, but break up the good things into bits in order to enhance pleasure. But of course, pleasure is not the only thing that is important for life. And so let's spend a few minutes to think about what makes up a good life. So when you ask people what makes up a good life, the most common question is happiness. We want to be happy, we want to feel joy, we don't want to be sad. But that's not everything. People also say they want a meaningful life. They want their work to have purpose. But things that elicit both happiness and a sense of purpose tend to do so less and less over time because of habituation. People who have diversified their lives, for example, they may have lived in different places, worked on different projects, interact with the diverse individuals, they tend to experience a more psychologically rich life. Because what variety does is it puts us in a state of learning. We have to learn about our new environment, we have to learn about the hierarchy, about the different people that we're interacting with. And studies show that people find pleasure in seeing themselves as learning, as progressing, as moving forward. So there is a sense that we get used to negative things around us, whether it's misinformation online or rudeness online, whether it is fraud. We get used to these things, and so we may not try to change them. So if you think back to something that you did that was quite scary, perhaps when you were a child and you had to jump into the pool for the very first time and you felt really scared. But finally you jump in, and what happens is the next time you jump, you're not as scared, right? So you jump maybe faster, maybe stronger. And then after a while, you're jumping head first. What we found is those individuals whose emotional habituation is quicker, they tend to take more risk in real life, and the risk escalates faster. We're not necessarily aware of how our brain works. We're not necessarily aware of how fast we habituate and what the consequences are. But if we become aware, then we can take actions to both enhance our well-being and also to perhaps notice and change the less great things around us, so we would like to do so. And often when I tell people about this kind of work, they ask, well, now that I'm aware of habituation, does that mean that it will go away? And the answer is no, it will not go away, but we can take actions, right, to reduce it. If you habituate slower, you keep more information in your mind, right? These sounds and smells and images and bits of information and knowledge are in your mind for longer. It could be very distracting on one hand, but it also means that these unexpected combinations will happen in your mind, right? Little bits of information that usually don't come together will suddenly collide and create this new idea. And so the question, I guess, for everyone is then, well, how do we induce dishabituation, meaning slower habituation or dishabituation, in order to enhance creativity? And I think the answer is what I talked about before, is changing your environment. Because by changing your environment, even simple things, going out of your office, you are dishabituating, right? You're creating a dishabituation. So you're able to, things are just like different around you. And I find this in my own experience. If I think about all the times that I got the ideas that then would lead to really important routes in my career, or like a solution that I found, in every case, it was not in front of my computer trying to figure out the solution. It was actually, I left my office or I did something else. Social media is a little bit like this AC in the background, where you kind of suspect that something is not so good for you or something is causing you a little bit of anxiety, but you don't really know for sure and you can't detect it because it's always on the background. So you know how there's an AC and then someone turns it off and then you're like, whew, that feels so much better because the noise was bothering me, but I didn't realize until someone turned it off. And I think social media is a little bit like that, where it can cause some anxiety, but we don't know it until we shut it down. We do talk a little bit about age and habituation and dishabituation in the book in terms of trying to explain the midlife crisis. So there's the well-known phenomena, which is happiness over life follows a U-shape. So happiness is quite high in teenagers and kids, and then it goes down, 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 reaches rock bottom in your midlife. So that's between like 40, 50, 60. But the good news, it actually goes back up then, and actually continues to climb back up until the last couple of years of life. And so in trying to explain why there's this dip in happiness in midlife, I think one speculation that we had is that is the time of least change, right? That is a time where family life usually is kind of the same. You perhaps are at the peak of your professional life, but it is stable. There is a minimum, perhaps, on average, amount of learning, right? There's a lot of learning and change going on beforehand. And counterintuitively, there is learning and change going later when you retire, when your kids leave the house, and so on. And it could be daunting, but it means that you have to try to figure out your new life, right? And it's that midlife part where things are just the same. We are looking at boredom and frustration in terms of the idea that we're usually bored because there is a minimal amount to learn and we're not getting new information, right? That's usually boredom. We're just doing the same thing. There's no information, no learning. And we also, on the other hand, get frustrated when things are so complex that we can't learn. There's too much information, right? And it is that middle ground, and this is actually a known phenomena, where you are most engaged and you are most happy in that middle ground where there is information, there is learning, but it is in the extent that is doable, right? So you're not on the edge. So I think boredom is one part of the scale, and then frustration is the other part of the scale. It's not that habits are a bad thing, right? Habits are very, very, very important. And I'm sure that the people who study habits also would not suggest that you should do the same thing over and over and over always. So in any of these kind of like psychological insights, we always have to remember that there's our mind and our brain is kind of the product of many complex rules and codes, right? If you think about like all the code that goes behind Google, right? Think about that. There's a lot of different rules, a lot of different things. So it's the same with our mind. There's a lot of different rules and different processes that go on. So it's not a one thing that is always true in all circumstances for all. The question is like, what is your goal? What is the context? We are habituating to negative things, and people do habituate to negative things. And even if you look back, to World War II the habituation of people on both sides, both the victims, but both the people, for example, Nazis, there is a lot of documentation of people actually talking about how things change really slowly. It changed so gradually that they couldn't even see it anymore, right? There's just wonderful quotes about people saying, it's kind of like you're in a field and you suddenly, the corn is so high, right? You didn't see it growing. And there isn't an easy solution. Part of the things that we talk about is what Stuart Mill calls experiments in living, which means that we can't really know what is good for our life or for society if we are just trying the same things, if we're just doing the same things over and over without trying things differently. And nowadays, it is easier both to experiment in our own life. You could do easy things like, for example, travel to different countries, see how things are in a totally different type of government, totally different culture. Back in the day, if you look, a long time ago, it wouldn't have been that easy because we used to live in relatively small environments where everyone spoke the same language, had the same habits and culture and so on. So it wouldn't be that easy. But nowadays we could do that. We could do that online. We can do it with interacting with different people. So what we suggest that some of that is helpful. I think a lot of people in comments to that article, they actually said, yes, I had the experience of, for example, living in Sweden, and how in Sweden the whole government is set up completely different, and that opened their eyes about how things are back here in the US. Right? So I think that's helpful, and you can do it by physically experimenting in different types of living, but also from taking other people's point of view, whether it is reading books, films, arts, and yeah, so that is the kind of things that we talk about. It's not like a pill that's going to solve everything.
Thank you all so much for attending, and please be sure to pick up a copy of Tali's new book, Look Again. Thank you so much for coming, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you.